All right, good morning everybody and welcome to our Regional Transport Committee meeting. Welcome to those online. We have Mayor Baker, Mayor Heffel, Councillor Cretney and Councillor Woodcock from SWDC, although I don't have a face for Councillor Woodcock, but I'm presuming you are there. I will open our meeting with a karakia. Whakatakatoho ki te uru, whakatakatoho ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia mataratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he ho, te he moriora. Thank you. We have apologies from Mayor Ron Mark from absence and Mayor Janet Holbrow, and in her absence we have Councillor Halliday attending. Somewhere?
Not yet.
Not yet.
No.
Anyway, do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Mayor Guppy. Thank you, Councillor Ponta. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Any
Hey, Adrian, there's an apology from Kim Fell, our CE, as well.
Sorry, what was that, Gary?
There's an apology from Kim Fell as well.
Right. Any conflicts of interest? No, and no public participation? No. So going on to confirmation of the minutes from 26 November. My goodness, that seems years ago, last year. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Thank you, Emma. All those in favour say aye. Yeah. Sorry? Yep. Okay. Now, moving on to item 5, which is the draft submission on our Land Transport Management Time of Use Charging Amendment Bill. Just a short name. And we have Catherine. Welcome. Over to you.
So, yes, so this is the draft submission on the Land Transport Management Time of Use Charging Amendment Bill, which was introduced and referred to Select Committee in March and is now open for submissions. Submissions closing 27th of April. So we have drafted a submission for RTC's consideration, and so I'll take it as read, and if there's any questions or comments or requested changes to the submission, happy to take those.
Thank you, Catherine. Questions? I have one, if I can be so bold as to go first. In the actual submission itself, so that is page 2 of 8 and page 14 on board books, in paragraph 2, recommending the strengthening of the purpose of the legislation, which I don't disagree with, but I've made a note here about mitigation outcomes associated with reduced motor vehicle use, and it says without reduced motor vehicle use we won't see the productivity gains, and I'm just wondering if that's a bit of a broad brush. Could you elaborate why you think reduced motor vehicle use provides productivity gain?
I guess the purpose of the stated purpose of this this bill is to change behaviour around, times of congestion. To the whole purpose of it is to increase efficiency and achieve productivity gains. And I think the point we're making here is if all that really happens is that the time of travel shifts to a different time, or the route changes, so people take different routes to avoid the charge, all that will happen potentially is that over time the congestion times shift, or other routes become congested. So it's kind of a shifting over time or spatially when congestion might happen. It's only really a matter of time before it clogs up again. So I guess our point that we were wanting to make perhaps here was that to make those real gains plus achieve the co-benefits, we would reduce gross traffic volumes in relation to obviously population. As population grows, they might, increase again, but and get people into alternative modes of transport and really provide the support for that to happen. So that was kind of, which would achieve those co-benefits, but also achieve what the government is wanting to achieve through this legislation.
Okay, so maybe if we speak to this, we might just have to elaborate on that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Iona.
Sorry, great submission. Thank you very much. Just two questions. The first was, I think Darren might have said it publicly, that there was no expectation you'd make a lot of money from a charging regime. Is that correct from your analysis? Given it says that you want to invest it back in public transport, so are we going to actually? Is this going to be effective to do that?
Yes, so it's not. It actually is very explicit in the explanatory notes that it is not. The purpose of it is not to create revenue, but I guess the flip side of that is exactly as you say. So any surplus that comes out of it will be reinvested. So it's not a profit-making kind of regime. Yeah. So I think that should be seen as a good thing. The only thing to note there, though, is that it's likely that even for those purposes, for the first 1, 2, 3 years, it's highly likely that the bulk of revenue that comes through will need to be allocated to the setup costs, the establishment costs and operational costs, and there probably won't be much left over. Therefore, that is why we make the point really strongly that we can't wait for that surplus revenue to come before properly investing in public transport. We need to do that proactively.
But after that 3 years, though, have you got any idea of how much might be able to be generated, given public transport is obviously expensive?
No, it's really difficult to say because it would depend on how the scheme is designed. Obviously, the simpler it is and less sort of arduous it is to administer, then more likely sooner there'll be some surplus revenue gains. But it's really, I would say, really difficult to say. And even globally, there's only been, half a dozen or so of these actually schemes successfully implemented. So it's difficult to even learn off those, which are entirely different, in terms of populations and geography and so on. Anyhow.
Yeah, I guess. Obviously, you want to know if it's going to work, right? Yeah. Just my other question is, obviously this is a very long-running issue, and the equity angle of it, which I talked about this like 30 years ago. So how will that equity be achieved so that people, say, living farther out won't then be disadvantaged?
So currently there is no capacity to create exemptions or mitigations through as the bill is currently drafted, and that is one thing that we note in the submission, that at the moment there isn't a means to create exemptions for those who are more disadvantaged, or disadvantaged from a transport perspective perhaps, or don't have other choices but to use a car to travel in. So that is one of the points that we make, that it needs to be designed in. There needs to be the ability for the scheme committee to design that in. At the moment, there is not that ability. So that has been a point of our submission as we drafted it. Yeah.
So an equitable way would be a subsidy, presumably, because you still want to charge people for, the impact that they're having. Yeah, is that right?
There's various means, including not doing it through the scheme. One of the things that Auckland Council suggested was that because they were very keen on, and this relates to your earlier point actually, that the more you introduce exemptions and so on, and subsidies and, you know, different systems for different people, the more expensive it is going to be to administer. So their suggestion was, first and foremost, the government should use already established social welfare sort of frameworks to enable people to fully, you know, still participate in society and go to work and so on, and do it that way rather than through the scheme. But they also said there needs to be, you know, mitigations in place. There's lots of ways that could be done, fair caps, or, you know, as you say, you know, some forms of subsidies through the scheme. We haven't suggested how that should happen in the as we've drafted the submission. We've simply said it needs to allow for that, and currently our sense as officers was that it doesn't enough.
Any other questions? Nothing online? No? If it's,
Yeah, I've got one. Thanks, Adrian.
sorry,
Woody here.
sorry.
Yeah,
Is that-
there you go. No, g'day everyone. It's my first time in these meetings. After taking over from Melissa. Yeah, I've had a look through this. It's sort of a little bit awkward for me because I'm a bit behind the 8 ball, but I did notice about putting money back into the public transport, anything that's made, but I have concerns of it all being put back into public transport, because there are probably other, maybe it shouldn't be stipulated to just put it into public transport. It should be into the transport sector somehow, because there are other things that may need to be done, and it may stifle you in the fact that you're limiting what you can do with the money. And I have a few concerns about the whole thing, reading it about how London had to take on so many extra buses and that from day one. And I was just wondering where the money's coming from for all this infrastructure and new resources we may need if this is implemented and actually goes the way people think it'll go.
I can respond to that, if I may, through the chair. Yes, a very, very good point. Where will the money come from? And I guess this is the point that, as officers, we were intending to make through the draft submission, that we need to. It's very, very clear for these schemes to work. There needs to be complementary investment in public transport and making active transport safe and so on. And that cannot be done by waiting on revenue to potentially show up through the scheme, which may be a year's, you know, have quite a latency period. So that is, in fact, the point that we make, which is less about the bill itself, but more that there needs to be adequate funding to allow public transport authorities and so on to invest in what they need to invest to support a scheme to enable people to travel in different ways if they so wish to. So it's a very good point, and I agree.
Has there been any figures brought up about what sort of money is needed?
Through the chair, no, not in respect. We haven't done any analysis on that, but I guess we have, you know, through current RLTPs, we sort of have a quantum. We kind of know how much it costs to invest adequately in public transport. So I suppose we can extrapolate from that it won't be particularly cheap. But I guess as the point is made in the submission, this is also on the back of already a situation where we're extremely funding constrained when it comes to public transport. So it's not really a new problem as such. I guess it's just emphasising the fact if a scheme like this is to be successful, we need more investment.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. No further questions or comments? No. Do I have a, oh, sorry.
NZTA is the advisor to Parliament on this bill, so I'll abstain.
Right, thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder, please? We have to approve the submission developed on behalf of the RTC and we authorise the committee chair to make minor editorial changes. Thank you, Councillor Pennant and Councillor Edwards. Do either of you wish to speak to the...
Chair, I'm just wondering if it would be helpful for you to talk about Auckland's position on the equity. Just as per what the officer said, just saying that you don't want to make it more burdensome and using existing mechanisms might work, just in case they ask a question.
You're talking about when we present?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Thank you.
If we can make that point. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think this is an excellent submission, and for me, the key sentence is on page 16. Without investment in alternative modes and improved accessibility through better urban form, there is a risk that New Zealanders will simply be penalised for trips that they are unable to avoid or make at another time, further adding to the cost of living crisis and exacerbating inequities. That sums it up for me. But I think the officers have put together a really good submission.
And I'm sure they'll appreciate that feedback. All right, if there is no further debate, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
Thank you very much. NZTA.
Right, we have a presentation. Thank you. Okay, so probably the first thing is probably the most noticeable thing that people will have seen across the network this summer is that there's been a very significant summer maintenance program across the country, and it's a real acceleration of our work program compared with previous years and NLTP periods, and we've seen utilisation of road closures at quite significant areas, including State Highway 1 through the Desert Road and other locations. And we are continuing that right through April for areas where we're using deep lift asphalt treatments. So most of the chip seal will be completed now because the temperatures start to drop. In the national ticketing solution space, we've had a pilot running on Route 29 in Christchurch from the airport, and seen people quite readily moving to the use of credit and debit cards. And I think we've seen that with the airport service here as well, that people move quite readily to those. And they are continuing to work through quite a complex range of things that need to be resolved as they start the rollout process down in Canterbury. So that's delayed things by a couple of months for that rollout, and we're continuing to work through that and work on the consequential impacts across the country for the rollout. So that's ongoing. But there's a huge amount of work going on to enable that to occur.
Can I just ask about that, Emma, because I'm conscious that the Regional Council will get a briefing on NTS later this week as well, perhaps at a higher level of detail. And I'm trying to understand from what you've just said just how serious those additional, the complications, if you like, that have arisen actually are. I mean, my sense is that they could actually delay us quite a bit, and I so keen to understand that, given that we have other frustrations on the network already, and a lot of angry commuters, if you like. So I'm sort of trying to look out 9 months, 12 months. Am I looking out 9 months or 12 months, or am I now looking in the Wellington region out to say 18 months or 2 years?
And that is really a matter for the detailed discussion that they will have with you. I don't have a forecast change to the rollout scheme at this stage. I think the team's very conscious that any changes to rollout timetables impact on the other ticketing mechanisms being used, and that obviously will have an impact where those contracts may need to be extended if that ends up being the case. So they are definitely looking at that, and that is what they'll be able to talk in more detail about when they come along for their briefing.
Could, just before you carry on, could I ask, there's been quite a bit in the press lately about pay wave fees, excuse me, and credit card fees. With this, using your direct debit, can people expect some form of fee over and above their
I have to confess I don't know the answer to that, but I can certainly get the team to clarify that.
I think that would be good if you could, please. Okay.
Now, since sending this presentation through, the legislation for roadside drug tests has passed, and so we are now focused on supporting police as they look to roll that out by the end of this year. So we've had a new advertising campaign go out to highlight the significance of drug driving and its involvement in serious crashes around the country, and then there'll be further updates and information available once we get into the implementation of those roadside tests.
Yes.
Sorry, can I just ask?
Oh, Darren, can you?
Sorry if this is a naive question, but what kind of drugs and who's using them, and is that sort of message going to get to them? I presume you've tested that.
Yeah, so this is the so in terms of the advertising campaign, this is the first wave of advertising campaign, which is about raising awareness across the population as a whole, because generally there is less awareness of drug driving and its involvement in serious crashes. So the first phase is to raise general awareness, and we know this from campaigns such as the drink driving campaigns that have been very successful over a number of years. So this is targeted at that. When we get to more specific population groups, they would have different types of campaigns targeting them, and what we tend to see is that those sorts of campaigns go through very different channels. We don't use TV advertising, for example, because those population groups probably don't watch TV. So it'll be much more social media focused. In terms of the tests themselves, police are doing their procurement process now. So it's the police will decide on which specific tests. So they, from memory, they're certainly covering cannabis, methamphetamine, and at least one other drug. So they have they're just doing the procurement process for that now.
Sorry, who's the most likely to offend in this area? Do you know?
No, I
You
don't
haven't got the data.
No, because we don't do testing currently. So
right. Okay. So you just
don't
so
know.
there isn't any sort of, I don't know, anecdotal reporting from police to know it's a problem.
Not that. Well, we do know that half of serious crashes have drugs involved. So we know it is a factor, but the extent of causation and population breakdown is not something that I've got information on.
Okay.
Safety cameras. I think I've talked to you before about the fact that NZTA is taking over the management of the safety camera network across the country. And so we're bringing in around 27 new permanent safety cameras, and we're also, as part of that, prioritising point-to-point safety cameras that look at average speeds, because we know that they're very effective at reducing deaths and serious injuries, and we are still working through and identifying the locations that they are most suitable for. So we need to look at a number of factors, including whether there is currently a safe and appropriate speed, what's the current mean speed and compliance, is there the ability to get services and suitable places for the cameras themselves, and do they capture all the vehicles on that corridor, and a number of the site access points and things that where people might leave or enter the network. So we're aiming to have those confirmed by the end of the year, and we'll also be looking after all mobile safety cameras from the middle of the year. We are bringing in a different provider for those mobile safety cameras, and so they'll be in vehicles and trailers rather than the trademark vans that you see on the side of the road, and we'll be making sure people are aware of that. And we'll continue working very closely with police on how we target particular corridors and use both the safety cameras and the road policing service that we have from police. Setting of speed limits, and we have the rule in force, and as you'll be aware, we've been through a consultation process for a number of corridors that we're due to have their speed reversed. That consultation is closed and will be considered by our board soon, and then we'll be in a position to advise which roads are being reversed and any that aren't. So we also have to then go through the process of scheduling in for the state highway network changes that are required to be implemented by 1 July. And that's this year. And then obviously 1 July next year for the speed limits outside school gates. And that's both on the state highways and on local roads. And there is NLTP funding at normal fare rates through the low cost, low risk program for implementing the changes required under the rule.
Could I just ask, please, this is a very parochial operational question about State Highway 2 at the south end of Featherston, but it had been 70 for a long time, and the community had campaigned to have it lowered to 50, which they got with the lowered speed limits, and it has been put back up to 70. And I asked our MP what could be done, and he sort of referred me to making a submission somewhere. Is there anything that they can do about that? Because people do ask me, they think I'm in charge of those sorts of things.
Yes, so we've had quite a bit of correspondence about Featherston South, and it was quite a tricky section of road because of a number of changes, including the change to the 40 speed in the centre of the township. So what it meant was that if we'd gone back to exactly as things were prior to the previous change in speeds, we would have had 4 different speed limits within several hundred metres, and that's not actually enforceable.
No.
So they went, the advice was to move that 70k speed limit in the way that was done prior to the reversal. We can't go back and change reversals before 1 July, but we can consider going through a further consultation process under the new rule, so including the economic impact assessment and consultation process. So we've certainly heard the feedback from the community, and we're looking at how we can add that into a program of future reviews.
Thank you.
So getting into regional specifics. Now, first of all, for our particularly for our Wairarapa friends, but also for anyone travelling through there.
We've got friends in the Wairarapa.
We actually, and later this year, we will have some more information available for the public about there's a really significant program of investment over about 4 to 5 years of rebuilding sections of State Highway as well as resealing some other sections. And we've had some really good sessions so far with both South Wairarapa and Carlton councils, and we'll be doing a further one with the Marston Council before the Solway section to actually talk to the councillors about the detail of the rebuilds that we're doing and also why they're so disruptive, because these are rebuilds where we go down sort of up to 1/2 metre deep and dig out the whole subsurface of the road, identify any soft areas and put some additional strengthening into those areas and then build that pavement back up. So this is the sort of thing that happens every 20 to 25 years in a road's life. And then every 10 years or so, you're resealing the top layer to maintain the structural integrity of the road. So we have the Greytown section about to start at the end of April, and 2 weeks for that. Carlton in May, which is 3 weeks allowed for that. And then the Marston Solway section starting later in May, and 3 weeks allowed for that. Now they are, that includes contingencies. So if all goes well, if we don't have any unexpected issues and the weather helps us along the way, we'd like to be in and out a lot quicker than that. But we have definitely established avenues for the impacted residents and businesses to be in touch with our team to work through how to manage those impacts. And so the Greytown is already well through that process, and everyone's been contacted. Carlton is getting underway now, and Marston will be getting in touch with everyone just a little bit further down the track to allow people time to prepare for that. And we have detour routes and everything established to help.
We have a question from Councillor Cretney.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Emma, Steve Cretney from Carlton District Council. Just a question on your timing, approximate timeframes. The workshop that you provided to us, you informed us it was going to be 2 weeks and 24/7. Has that now changed by your timing that's in this?
There's 2 weeks of sealing works. The 3 weeks includes the drainage works that we're working together with your team to move some of those laterals from under the road, so they don't have the same road closure process for those.
Okay, is it still going to be worked on 24/7?
I just have to go back and double check that, because it's residential in the Carlton section. I know they had looked at exactly how long they were going to work in the evenings because of the disruption, but I can just double check that and get back to you on that. They're certainly looking 24/7 as much as possible.
Thank you.
Okay.
And over our summer program, we have 81% completed at the time of sending this through. They've done some more since then. And again, we've used those full closures, particularly for night works, to get things done as quickly as we can and as safely as we can. And then the next one to get underway will be the State Highway 2 Totra Park, including the final section of medium barrier through there, which is the one outstanding piece that hasn't been done yet. And occasionally we do get good feedback, so it's lovely when people can actually see the difference that those programs are making in terms of the journey quality. This is now feels like ages since this happened, but the final repairs for the underslip on Remataka Hill, pictures there, and then we have more resurfacing coming, so some more overnight closures happening. but we were able to get quite a lot of maintenance work done during the closures for that particular slip. So that's helped our team get ahead of their schedule for a lot of those works.
And I have another parochial operational question. The slow traffic lane that was taken out from a slip on the North Featherston side, it was taken out about the same time as this work that's already been completed. So I wondered where that is on the program.
Yes, it's on the program to look at this as part of this season's work. And we do know that is something that people are very keen to have back to full capacity. So they are definitely looking at that. It is quite a challenging site, as you know. So I'm not sure that I have a timeline for that one yet, but we'll certainly be putting that out through the normal channels as soon as we've got that locked in.
Thank you.
Another big piece of work carried out through Nightworks was the Kilburnie intersection upgrade, and this was a really important upgrading of our signals, wiring, and all the communications technologies that sit behind traffic lights. And because we closed the network here for tunnel maintenance and so on, we have a whole lot of quite technical stuff sitting under the road there, and it was reaching the end of its life. So we had quite a long period of underground and overnight closures while we dug up the road, as you can see there, and that was all successfully completed, and there's just a bit more resurfacing work still to go. Moving on to roads of national significance, I just, as a bit of context here, as you'll be aware, the government policy statement identified 17 roads of national significance and directed the agency to get on with the investigations for those roads. We're currently in what we call the investment case phase, which is doing the work to support our board's decision on how to give effect to that direction for each of those projects. So this is not, we're not at a stage where we can give you a whole lot of detail on that because the board hasn't yet made its decisions on those things. So the roads of national significance are generally expected to be 4 lanes, 100k expressway standard roads. And in some locations, we might want some exceptions to that. We might need to look at some of the approved scope and check that that's actually going to be possible given the other constraints. And we also need to look at, the board will have to look over across all of these at funding, financing and phasing questions. So I'm just forewarning you that I can't necessarily answer any questions on those matters because we haven't yet considered those investment cases and made decisions. But for the Petone to Granada Link Road and the Cross Valley Link, we have an approved scope, which is an efficient transport connection between Lower Hutt and the North Wellington Porirua area, and a feasibility study on the Cross Valley Link. And there's a set of benefits there that have been identified that this road and the Cross Valley Link could contribute to. And we are currently in that process of preparing an investment case, and as part of that, we've started engagement with some senior officers at relevant councils to find out things about, particularly about existing infrastructure and other transport connections that we would have to consider as part of that investment case process. So that's the Petone to Granada Link Road, and it's been, I think, a really valuable opportunity for our team to be able to not assume that we're definitely going with the previous alignment, but to look at what are the best options available to deliver the scope of as set out here. The next one is the somewhat opaquely named State Highway 1 Wellington Improvement RONS. And the approved scope for this one is a second Mount Victoria tunnel and a second terrace tunnel, a basin reserve upgrade with grade separation between State Highway 1 and local roads, and supporting improvements on the remaining State Highway 1 corridor through the city. And the benefits of this are to improve travel time savings from north of the city to the airport, hospital, and CBD, reliability improvements so that the road isn't as subject to both congestion-related delays but also incidents on the network. PT travel time savings on key routes, and that relates to some of the impacts on local roads as well, and the reduction in local road traffic, and particularly looking at harbour quays, which is used extensively now. So again, we are in the investment case phase for this project, and we are beginning the engagement with the officers at both Wellington and Greater Wellington to, again, understand those key interactions, and in the case of GW, understanding the PT, both the opportunities, the role of PT in mitigation during construction, and the opportunities for PT long term.
Yes.
What does grade separation mean at the basin reserve? Are you resurrecting the flyover, or is it a more moderate?
My expectation is that it'll be more similar to what we were looking at in the most recent design work that was done for Let's Get Wellington Moving, where we had the arrest tunnel extension used to provide grade separation rather than any significant new or different structures.
Housing, is there any thought being done around that? Because Minister Bishop did talk about some opportunities like around Cambridge Terrace.
So in terms of this project, as with any project, it does provide housing opportunities, and the connectivity to, obviously, the state highway network can make that quite desirable. We would expect that there would be quite a range of housing opportunities as both of the projects in the Wellington region progress, but the specific housing opportunities would be a matter for further discussion with council.
And do you have any idea around the costs? Because the tunnels were running at over $1 billion each.
So that's a part of the investment case consideration.
And are you going to do a full job of looking at the impacts of climate change and providing for cyclists and pedestrians who also need to move around our city?
And the scope is quite clear, and it is for the state highway corridor. And so the investigations will be looking at how we deliver to that scope.
So there won't be any provision for pedestrians and cyclists?
We haven't completed the investment case yet, but we have to focus primarily on the scope that's been identified for the project.
By the government? Yeah.
And the final key road of national significance is the Otaki to North Levin, and this is much further along in its process. So we have 2 alliances signed up for this project, and the main construction start is expected later this year, and it's going through the detailed design process to ensure that it is able to be constructible, affordable, and cohesive so that we deliver all those outcomes that are expected for it. It has resource consents and notices of requirement, and it will be tolled. And we have some pre-implementation works underway at State Highway 57 Tararua Road, and continual work underway, particularly with the Horowhenua Council about how it integrates with the Taraika growth area. So that's obviously has a big impact just on our northern border, and will be again another important part of creating that safe, resilient, and efficient connection to the north.
Excuse me, can I comment on that?
Questions?
Yeah, look, just sorry, Councillor Martin Halliday from Kapiti Coast. We recently had a presentation from NCTA around the savings that they're looking at making at that piece of work. It's sort of coming quite last minute. I'm aware, expressed quite strong concerns around the cuts that are being made with regards to lanes and other things as well. Do you know if there's been any progress with regards to the concerns raised by KCDC in that space?
No decisions have yet been made on the final form of the matters that have been discussed in council only time.
Okay, cool.
Also on the Kapiti Coast, on Friday we opened the new cycle lane clip-on the Otaki River Bridge. So that's now available to cyclists doing the loop or wanting to connect back on Old State Highway 1. There are a number of other improvements on Old State Highway 1 to prepare for the transfer off that road, and so there's been quite a significant amount of work at the Tohoro intersection area, and that's just gradually moving further north, and then we'll be moving into the Otaki retail precinct this month to complete the works there.
And just wanted to say thank you very much. That we had the opening of that last week, I think. Absolutely fantastic piece of infrastructure, and the work that's going on in Otaki Ranti Horo, much appreciated and looking great.
Yeah, I was up there a couple of weekends ago, and yeah, could definitely see the difference.
Question from Councillor Edwards.
Could I ask the cost of that clip-on? I don't know whether it's similar to what Ava Rail Bridge in terms of bridge length and so on, but is it? We have only got an indicative cost for a clip-on for a cycle lane, pedestrian lane on Ava. What was the cost of this clip-on?
I'd have to get something from the team on that. I don't have that at my fingertips. This is a particular methodology that we've sourced from Australia. So the company doing this. So there are various different methodologies that are used dependent on the age of the substructure and the type of attachment used. So, but we can certainly provide that. Milling transport improvements. So this is the Transport Agency's part of Te Wai Takamori o Te Awa Kairangi, and we are still in the interim project alliance agreement phase, but looking to move relatively soon into final contract phase. And we've had a lot of really important and detailed conversations and negotiations with both Hutt City and Greater Wellington Regional Council, because there are both Hutt City and the Greater Wellington Flood Protection Works all happening in that same area, and we need to really closely integrate our contracts and how we work together in that space. So that's been really positive and constructive to see the progress we've made there, and we'll have further announcements on that very soon. State Highway 58, so the Ministry of Transport announced, well, it was slightly more than last week now, but that the final stage of the project will begin in the coming months. So we're just updating our contract with because of the delays to getting this started. And so the final work here is to complete the roundabouts at both Flighties and Moonshine, and the other safety improvements. There's a bridge widening and some culverts, and also looking at medians and roadsides as well for safety. So that will take a couple of years to complete, but obviously really critical for that connectivity across the region.
We have a question from Mayor Baker.
Thanks, Emma. Just very quickly, the bridge that was being widened by PCL closer to Patanui, they stopped work on that months and months ago, yet it's almost complete and we have road cones everywhere. Is that going to be done before the roundabouts?
I have to
You
just
can
check.
come back to me because you might not have that.
Yeah, I don't have the actual construction timeframe, so yeah, I can absolutely come back to you on that.
Thank you.
And Te Ara Tupua, and not great deal to say here, except it's on track, on budget, and is starting to look great. We've had the first of the vertical seawalls started installation. You can see those from the train if you're coming in and out. And they're really important because that's where we need to protect ecological areas. And so we don't particularly want people immediately accessing those and disturbing wildlife. So there are some areas where there will be relatively easy access for people to sort of clamber down to the water's edge, and there'll be other areas with the walls that enable more protection of the wildlife. So huge amount of work. It's really starting, you can really start to see now exactly how it's going to look, which is really exciting. And that's it from me.
Oh, Darren.
Can I just ask on the Te Ara Tupua, where are the closest public toilets on either end or along the way?
I'm not sure exactly where the public toilets are, Darren.
So my concern is that it's fine if you're cycling perhaps, but I'm presuming the closest public toilets are somewhere quite further into Wellington City, not in Naurunga. And the other public toilets are probably those that may have now been relocated in and around the rowing club. So if you're walking that path, I'm not sure if you can walk with your legs crossed, or I don't know what happens.
I guess it's not dissimilar to the walkway around the New Plymouth Harbour, but it's probably something that needs to go on the
It's going to
radar
arise at
at the
some
Wellington
point.
end
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, not my issue to look after.
I think that's a relevant point. Just interested how TAs will actually integrate with that project and make sure that there is better provision for pedestrians. Are you having those conversations?
Yes, we've been working with both Hutt City and Wellington City on how it integrates at both ends.
Okay. And there will be discussion about things like amenity, like toilets?
I'm not aware of what specifically has happened around toilets. I know that we've never had it in scope to include on the pathway itself.
Any other questions? Excuse me. No? Thank you. Excellent. Great to see stuff happening in our region. It's always a nice feeling. Kiwi Rail. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Adrian. Which one? Okay. So I'll take a quick journey through the projects that are afoot and more to the point, what is coming. Let's start with the Rimataka Tunnel, and I'd like to focus on the benefit statement at the bottom as to, at the end of the day, why do we do this and put a lot of commuters through so much grief? And the answer is we have now eliminated what was a very real risk to the continuation of services with the condition of the track and the tunnel. That risk is gone, and I would say gone for the next 70 years in terms of that. We had a really, I won't say successful Christmas, because we did get it open and we got it open in time, but we didn't open as well as I would have liked. There were three things that drove it. We had a dust problem that we hadn't anticipated in all the prior work, and that was getting to the stage where engines were clogging up and not going. It was very severe. We had a number of gas alarms on the way through, which means evacuation, then waiting for purge time, which goes to productivity. And we had a plant failure at a critical junction, and we had contingency in place, but the compounding effort of those meant we didn't get the engineering basis as complete as we would have liked, which meant it's put a delay into getting the speeds back, and it meant we have to do some more work over Easter. Overall, we completed it, we got it done in time, we've got it done in budget, and we had no safety incidents. And if I look at maybe some of the pictures on the next page, putting aside the lots of orange, you can get an idea of the work environment. And when you're in the middle of that sort of 4 kilometres in, it's actually hard grind. No one was in any way harmed during the entire production of this tunnel. So I'm extremely proud of that. If we look at Wellington re-signalling, and I'll talk a little bit about what happened last week so people have got an idea on this. This is a Crown-funded project. What are we trying to do here? The benefit, we're putting a safety improvement because we're spreading out the junction, and we're adding things called train stops, which deals with overruns. We had an 89-year-old signal box and control system, which has subsequently been replaced. So that
you didn't let it get to 100 and get
we had it. Listen, I know it's 89 because we didn't let it even get to 90. we wheeled it off to the old folks' home and left it there. So again, this project has been running for 3 and a bit years, and we have been progressively replacing little bits of this junction over that time, and basically under the nose of the commuters, because every time you do that, you've got to bring it back into operation the next day. And the whole way through, this was, in my experience, the most complex signalling and reconstruction job I've ever been involved with. And at no stage do we fail to get it back together on time for the next day's trains, which is why the failure last week is so intensely frustrating to us and obviously the commuters. But if you look at what's there, we've still got to do a bit of tidy up in terms of demolition. There's some pretty ratty old structures there that will come down. We're also going to do a few enhancements because when we budgeted this job, we had quite a significant contingency, which said, well, if it goes well, it will open in Christmas. If it goes with more than with an average share of failure, we have a risk of running through to Easter. Now we finished there, so we had a substantial contingency for this work, and we're in consultation with GW and Transdev to say, are there some things that we left behind in terms of value engineering, because you could keep on spending money in this area, etc. Some items that we could bring back into scope over the next 9 months, which will just improve the efficiency through the junction. And we're working through with officers and Transdev on 4 of those. And that's potentially another about $3 million to be spent in that area and still coming in under budget. And again, that's the photo to the left looks at the type of technology we have in there, and sort of down the centre that night it was 24 hours. The failure last week, as I said, was incredibly frustrating. It was a piece of kit that takes the power from the grid, turns it into a different supply modulation, goes into the batteries that run the system. That piece of kit, which is incredibly expensive for reasons the manufacturer hasn't yet been able to explain, failed. It did send out distress messages on to the team, which says, "I am failing. Help! Help me here." And you've got some time. Help! Help! But having reviewed the messages, even the manufacturer is saying they didn't appear to be standard messages that people could absolutely interpret as saying, "I'm drowning here." So there was, for reasons we still don't know, a failure about a piece of kit. We've got it all around the country. It exists everywhere else around the world. To all intents and purposes, I said on Radio New Zealand, it looks like it's just brand new out of the box. It looks perfect, except it just doesn't go. So I think, a real attack of sod's law. But it was disappointing because the team had put 3 years into picking this thing apart and putting it back together again, and to have it fail post-operation is the type of thing that makes you gnash your teeth. Bridge 3, that's the bridge that goes over the Hutt Road into the tunnels. That was delivered, funded by the Crown as part of the Overdue Renewals Fund. It was done in the absolute teeth of the worst of the Christmas weather. It's possibly the most exposed location in Wellington in terms of wind and rain. What's it done? We had a speed restrictions coming out of that, and we had asset deterioration that is now dealt with in perpetuity. Well, for the next 50 years in any event. We did a bit of work through Pororua. Same benefits, we're placing track and turnouts. Again, speed restrictions were due to be placed on that area. It's now done, and we've also replaced some overhead lines. Councillors may remember that QRail was funded to deliver a package of overdue renewals by the Crown for the Wellington network. The funding for that only came through at the end of September for a year's work, so we're accelerating as much as we can. We've got, as you can see on the stats, 20 projects progressing as planned, some with delay risk and some that will go into the next financial year. So the key issue is some shortages of material, because some of the stuff has a very long lead time, and some of it relating to consents. We were hoping to do a lot more work in streams and etc. for culverts, which deals with flooding and over risks. We have not been able to get the consents at the pace that we had hoped to get. If we look at the projects that are delayed, first one is obviously Ava, and I think we really got to a very sensible end point on that. We've provided Hutt with some designs, and they can do plans for the walkway. Everyone knows it has to be replaced. Everyone who's walked on that knows it has to be replaced. We wanted to replace the elements of the railway bridge, giving Hutt City some time to work through that. And even if the walkway can't go in contemporaneously, to have a program where it can go in still gives a lot of certainty. So I think we got to a very good outcome there. Talked about the culvert work. We just consenting delays through that. And the final one that's a bit delayed is you're painting bridges, because they're steel bridges, so for your spot that you paint them for rust. The workbank was much greater. The weather was much worse than you would expect over Christmas. You can only do this at certain temperatures and in the dry. We're actually just moving to a period where if you contracted someone to do this work, the first thing they would do is put in a weather claim, and you just have extension. So it's better to delay it and do it when it's fine. We've got in there, next one's a very exciting drawing, which no one will look at, but it just shows you the process and progress. I think we're making satisfactory progress. I'd like to be a bit further ahead on this than we can, and we'll need to talk to ministers and officials about extending the funding into FY26. But overall, I think the network's benefited from the investment, and it's gone to the right places. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions? Anita, yes, it's not a hand from last.
Sorry.
Cool.
No, it's a question about the Plymouton tracks. I know they're not listed there. The barrier arms at Plymouton have been having major problems. The cars have been having to go in and out of the barrier arms while they're down permanently, and those traffic lights are causing bedlam still. Now, I don't know whether it's you or Kotahi over the traffic lights. Everyone's had a guts full, and when the barriers arms stay down permanently, it's even more dangerous. Has anyone got any update on that?
I'm not aware of the day-to-day operational issue with the barriers. So just make a point that QRail has actually changed its structure a little bit, and I am now accountable for such matters in the metro areas. But that wasn't the case 2 weeks ago. So Anita, I just don't know. With respect to the traffic lights, that's an EMA issue. But our signalling system and those traffic lights are integrated. So they should be working in tandem. So it looks only something we can take away, Anita, as opposed to addressing.
I can tell you they're not working in tandem. Yeah, Mike, do you?
Well, it's Mike on the GM infrastructure, so maybe we can take that offline, Dave, and have a chat about that.
Yeah, it would be useful too. So we've got some facts to come back with. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, participate in that conversation around
Yep.
traffic lights, because I know WTOC's been monitoring them, and they had some issues, but most of those had been ironed out. So if they're still continuing, we definitely want to know.
Iona?
David, you said something about rephasing after the budget. Obviously, you don't know what the Minister of Finance is doing, but what do you think would be likely for the CHOP?
I think we have been asked to take money out of the overall network budget. I don't believe there'll be very much at all in the metro areas that changes. It will be more in the freight network that will come through there. We have the Crown funding. We're close, I think, Sam, to agreeing what the track access charges will be for next year. So I think to the extent it is stuff coming out, it will be relatively modest in metro.
That's possibly reassuring, but we do want to get as much freight as we can onto rail. So is that going to have a significant impact? Any funding cuts?
We're working through what the things will be. Clearly, we're going to focus on those routes that have the most prospect for freight, and that includes the NIMT, which is part of the Wellington Metro network. But I don't think it will immediately. If we continue to have a decline in the quality of the asset, clearly it does over time. But at this stage, no, we're targeting our lower level of investment as much as we can on assets where we can potentially slow the traffic down without loss of traffic.
Sorry, just one more question. What would $2 billion buy you?
It would buy a lot of things. It would buy things for the metro network, including a change to the signalling system. It obviously could buy a lot, or you could look at it and say it buys about 4 to 5 years worth of renewals.
Thank you. If I could just ask a question, Dave. From a customer point of view, the whole rail system is quite complicated because, you know, you run the railroad, whatever you want to call it, and then we own the trains and Transdev run them for us. But the customer doesn't actually care. They just want the train to run and to know what's happening. And so I'm just wondering, how can we be more joined up, the three of us, with regards to comms? And you know, I'm not having a go at anybody here, but the Rimitaka Tunnel was a case in point. We've just done this fantastic work, and we all clapped our hands. What a great job you'd done! And then we had these TSRs that everybody sort of wasn't anticipating. I mean, oh. And then we pile on the issues we've had with Transdev, and I'm just wondering how we can just be a bit more joined up and a wee bit more customer focused in the way that we deal with these things. Have you got any ideas for us there?
Well, I'll start with that, and maybe officers want to join in. I think a key change, which happens in June, will be having Transdev co-located with ourselves in the one control centre. We've been doing that in Auckland for the last year. To be in the same room, looking at the same screen when something happens is always more efficient than picking up the phone and dialing. With respect to the Wairarapa line, I think, like I said in my slide, we finished it, but we didn't finish it as well as would have liked, and that has gone to the TSRs in that area. In terms of communications on things like crew shortages and other things with Transdev, yes, we should try to be aligned. It is a very difficult thing to do, though, when you've got a three-way. I think the co-location is key, and I think and I know the teams met again last week to discuss the clarity of messaging, and in particular the implications of closures and what it comes back like. I had hoped to come back after Christmas with Rimitaka running trains at 90 kilometres an hour through that tunnel, and I'm still running them at 60. So that is what's really under my skin in terms of trying to get that resolved.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? that's the end from Kiwi Rail. Thank you very much. And our last item, number 8, is the progress report on significant and committed activities. Rose, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. So we present for information the regular 6-monthly progress report on significant and committed activities in the RLTP 2021 as presented in the midterm review 2024. So this is the first progress report on activities in the new triennium, so the 2024-27 period. Attachment 1 to the report also includes a column reflecting whether or not each significant activity, as ranked in the midterm review, received funding from the National Land Transport Fund. Where a significant activity is no longer proceeding as a result of those outcomes, the health indicator statuses have been grayed out. Where activities are proceeding with local share, those health indicator statuses remain active. We would note that the National Land Transport Program was published on the 30th of September, so that's halfway through the period of this report, which runs through 31st of December of last year. So in terms of how budget shortfalls may affect scope and time of projects, we note that future reports will be able to provide more clarity around that. So we'll take this report as read and happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yes, certainly, Dave.
I had to do it to myself, but I thought that it was lovely to see the rail being a sea of green, but in truth, I don't believe it is. I guess just asking the question, how hard do we mark our own report card here?
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. So through the chair, we'd note that our team collates this report on behalf of the Regional Transport Committee. So we work with the respective officers at organizations. So we don't necessarily, from our team's perspective, do a grading exercise on these, but rather collect those inputs from the respective organizations.
So you're saying you actually don't you effectively get a report where someone says, yeah, we're fine, but you don't actually apply a reviewing eye over that?
No, we do not, but we expect the officers at organizations to get those signed off by their respective up the chain, I suppose. So those would have been signed off by group managers at each organization.
I'm reasonably confident I didn't sign these ones off. Okay.
Oh, well, something to work on. I own it.
My new role, yeah.
I'd just like to support that comment from you, David. Yeah, there was a lot of green, and look, this is a constant challenge, right, in local government, right? Well, maybe central government too, just assessing how well we're doing things. Is there another way of giving a bit more detail on how things really are going?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the chair, I think that future reports will better be able to show how things are going. We do note, just per the way that the health indicator definitions work, it can be a bit of a slightly misleading presentation, in that, for instance, cost will remain green until there's a cost overrun within a certain percentage, but it won't show necessarily if cost underspend, for instance, is affecting whether a project outcome can be achieved. We also note that some of these new significant activities are in the business casing phase, so where a business case hasn't yet been completed, that scope and time may remain in green until such a time as the business case is completed, the scope is finalized, and then future reports going into pre-implementation and implementation will show how that is being affected. But we are definitely happy if there are suggestions of parameters you'd like to see evaluated in future reports, happy to receive those suggestions.
Well, I do have a suggestion, which is impact on the climate. Do you think you'd be able to do that? Because we should be tracking how we're doing overall as we build that transport system, particularly since we do have a system, a very good plan to reduce transport emissions.
Thank you, Councillor Pennant. We're happy to definitely take that one back. It also aligns with the transport emissions reduction pathway that was published by our team, so it's likely we'd be able to include some monitoring in that context.
Dave?
I think it's maybe a philosophy, and I guess it's hard when you're putting these things out. The more red you have, the more says someone's doing terrible. But I think, from a committee's point of view, we shouldn't be afraid of red. We shouldn't be afraid of amber, because it just says it's red, we need to do something. It doesn't mean it's failure. It's just it's a focus, and we've adopted a philosophy: just embrace the red. If it's there, it's real. You can get on and do something with it. And to the extent that the Kiwi Rail report is a slightly redder tinge than it is now, then so be it.
Darren?
Yeah, look, I recognise what David's saying here, and I agree. I wonder whether the reminder that we need to send to all agencies, including Greater Wellington, in terms of inputting this, is that these are public documents and they're on the record for saying these things. So, I mean, I don't think that we want to spend time checking on agencies, but they should be very transparent in what they're putting up. And if it's red, it's red. If it's amber, it's amber. And let's not shy away from that. Because at some point we were in front of the public and they're saying, what the hell's going on here? So maybe a reminder to them about the significance of the documents and the milestones, and making sure they're transparent in the way in which they communicate those.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Rose, in terms of the monitoring, I mean, can you put, like, obviously some of these pieces of work are very significant. So is it possible to put, we're halfway through or we're getting to the end point? That would be useful information too.
Through the chair, that sounds like a good suggestion, so we can include more information about where we are in a particular phase as part of that update note.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rose. That brings us to the end of our meeting, and I will close with a karakia, but just before I do, we have a short workshop after, but we'll break for 15 minutes for those online, and then there is there's another link for you to use for the workshop. It just has one item in it. Anuhia, anuhia, anuhia ki te uru tapanui, ki wātia, ki mama, ki nāko, ki tinana. Te warua I te ata takata. Koe ra rongo whakarie ake ke ronga, ki tina, huie, tākie. Thank you, everybody. We will be back at 11:30.